Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today for Hanley Foundation's presentation on how to administer Narcan. My name is Alli Jimenez. I'm the Vice President of Program Development at Hanley Foundation. And today I'm really going to be walking you through the necessary steps of how to administer Narcan. Also, I'm going to be sharing with you the importance of why we carry Narcan and also some statistics that really inform our reasonings for wanting to have Narcan readily accessible to anyone and everyone, everywhere. So when we're thinking about learning how to respond to an overdose, to an opioid, we want to think of naloxone or Narcan as a fire extinguisher. So having a fire extinguisher in your house does not mean that you're intending to set things on fire, but what it means is you're prepared in the event of an emergency until first responders can arrive. The same principle applies to having Narcan. It doesn't encourage somebody to use opioids. It doesn't encourage or include that someone's going to have a bad reaction to opioids. It's really just simply available if it's needed. So what is Narcan, or naloxone is the drug name? Narcan essentially works by reversing the effects of an opioid by knocking an opioid off of its receptors in your body. And through this, it will then reverse the effects of an opioid overdose. This then triggers normal breathing, because one of the first things that happens, as I'll get to in this presentation, is your breathing becomes rapidly slowed when you're experiencing an overdose to an opioid. So this reversal will then trigger normal breathing, and it's a nasal spray that's incredibly easy to use. So this is the nasal spray here. I will demonstrate how to utilize this, but it looks very similar to a Flonase solution. So there's different dosage forms of Narcan. In medical settings, you typically can see where there is a naloxone injection. There's also an auto injector that looks very similar to an EpiPen. There is the nasal spray, which is readily accessible and for sale in pharmacies everywhere. There's also a more potent version of this nasal spray. It's called Cloxado, and instead of a 4 milligram, it is actually 8 milligrams per injector here. So some important things to know about Narcan is that Narcan only works by reversing an opioid overdose. It will not hurt someone if they're not having an opioid overdose, but they're having another medical emergency. By giving someone Narcan, it's not going to cause any major reactions that will harm them by giving them the medication. It is legal to have in Florida, so you don't have to worry about carrying Narcan. That's a really common question that we get is it okay for me to have this? It absolutely is. It's actually sold over the counter, but we are able to provide it for free through a grant that we received through the Department of Children and Families in Florida. So it is legal. It will not hurt somebody that is having another medical emergency, and it will only work by reversing an opioid overdose. So what are opioids? Opioids are types of drugs that change the brain chemistry to reduce pain, essentially, and they're known as pain relievers, painkillers. They can be prescription or illegal. Some very common examples of opioids include hydrocodone, Percocet, oxycodone, morphine, fentanyl, and heroin. So typically we hear more when we think of the illegal type of opioid would be fentanyl or heroin. However, fentanyl is also used in medical settings under the prescription of a medical doctor. So there are different types and forms of it. There's also something that's not listed here that's called carfentanil, and that is really a very, very higher potency street illegal drug, and it's about 10,000 times stronger than regular fentanyl. And so it's very strong, and oftentimes one of these does not always work. So that is why we have the 8 milligram dosage. So what is fentanyl? Fentanyl is an extremely strong and potent opioid. It's commonly mixed with other drugs like cocaine. There's also times where it's mixed with pills that will look like your typical pill that you have. Maybe someone ran out of their Adderall, or somebody ran out of another medication that they have, and someone presents to them a pill that looks like their typical prescription pill that they would normally use, but instead it's actually a counterfeit pill. And so a lot of times what happens is these counterfeit pills, they're pressed to look just like a prescription pill, but they in fact do not contain the same ingredients. They're also often cut with fentanyl because it is so cheap to manufacture. So most of the time, individuals don't even know when or if a substance may be contaminated with fentanyl. And this is why we're seeing a rise in opioid deaths. Before someone develops a substance use disorder, they overdose the first time that they're trying something or taking something because they didn't know that it was laced with something else, specifically fentanyl. If you look at this graph here on the right, you'll see that the rates of opioid deaths climbing, but the crisis has really spread to all age groups, but especially younger adults. And so we really want to make sure that we have Narcan available to people of all ages, but really educating our younger adult population and adolescents on why this is so important to have. When somebody knowingly or unknowingly take something that contains fentanyl, it can lead to an overdose. So when we're checking for the signs of an opioid overdose, questions that you want to ask yourself are, do they have smaller or pinpoint pupils? Are they unconscious and not waking up? Does their skin look different? Maybe their lips are blue or pale. Is their breathing different? Is it shallow? Is it slow? Is it kind of raspy? Because a lot of times what you'll hear is somebody that's really struggling to take a deep breath in because their heart rate is slowed so much and their body is so relaxed that they begin to have trouble breathing. So these are typical signs of an opioid overdose. So the first thing you want to do is you want to administer the Narcan, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do this in one moment. But you also, as soon as you administer that first dose of Narcan, you also want to call 911 immediately. And the most important thing to say is that someone is unresponsive. You want to provide the address of where you're at. If you don't know the address, I always tell people, be aware of your surroundings. And if you don't know the exact address of where you're at, always be aware of cross streets, landmarks that are nearby, so that way you know where you can tell first responders to come to. You're also going to let them know that one dose of Narcan has been administered, and then you're going to stay on the phone with 911 until law enforcement or first responders arrive. So you definitely want to always follow the dispatcher's instructions and always stay on the phone with them until emergency personnel have gotten to the scene. So you're going to administer the first dose by holding it just like this. So you'll have two fingers on the top and your thumb here on this little red nozzle here. And so what you'll do is, to do it, you will put the top of the device in your nostril like this, in the person's nostril, and you're going to push this red button up. Once you push that red button up, you're then going to remove this, and you're going to wait about 2 minutes. During that time, you're going to put them in the recovery position, which looks like this picture here. So you will have you'll have them turn on their side, whichever side they're on, the leg that is on top. You're going to lift this leg and you're going to bend it so the knee will stop the body from then rolling over onto the stomach. You also want to make sure that their hand is supporting their head if they are on the ground. Now, the purpose of the recovery position is because sometimes when medication is given, somebody can vomit. And so when they begin to vomit, you always want to make sure someone's on their side so they do not choke on their own vomit or inhale that. You're also going to wait 2 to 3 minutes. So after 2 minutes, if the person has not become conscious, or maybe they became conscious and then they fell unconscious again, you're going to re-administer the other dose that comes in the box. So each box has 2 doses of this. So you're going to administer it now in the other nostril. Not the same one, but the other one that's in the box. Once that happens, hopefully by that point, first responders have arrived. And if they have, you're then going to let them take over. During this time period, when somebody is given Narcan, if they have built up a tolerance to a substance, they sometimes can become violent once they become conscious. The reason for that is it's something called a precipitated withdrawal. And essentially, it means that they're being thrown into withdrawal symptoms immediately because there's no more opioid in their body. So, what you always want to do is when you administer Narcan, you want to stand back a little bit, give yourself some space, and then wait that 2 minutes to administer a second dose if necessary. By that time, first responders have hopefully arrived, and what you're going to do is let them take over from there. Some frequently asked questions that we get is, am I protected from liability if something bad were to happen to a person that I administered Narcan to? So in all 50 states, there is something called Good Samaritan laws, and Florida does have Good Samaritan laws that will protect you. We recently, last year, did a presentation at a school in Broward County, Florida, and because of this presentation and the student learning about Good Samaritan laws, he was actually able to call and get help for 2 students that were experiencing an overdose. And so, again, Good Samaritan laws protect you when you're acting with good faith and good intention and helping save someone else's life. Where can you get naloxone or Narcan? In most states, you do not need a prescription. You can just simply go into any pharmacy and ask for naloxone. So it is usually around $50 per box. So that is where you'd be able to get it. But you also can get it in one of your community providers that has a Narcan cabinet supplied by the Hanley Foundation. Do I do CPR? If I know how to do CPR, you can do CPR, but you also want to make sure that you feel very comfortable in being able to administer CPR. So if you're not comfortable doing CPR, if you're not trained in CPR, please do not try to attempt to do that. If you're not comfortable doing rescue breaths, but you are comfortable with doing compressions, you can do that. But you always want to follow the best practice for utilizing CPR. Is expired Narcan dangerous to administer? It is not dangerous to administer, and it will still work. So on every medication, there's always an expiration date. There's also instructions on safe storage of Narcan. But the truth is, there's been tons of research done that shows that Narcan is still good, even if it's been in hot climates, even if it is expired. It's always best to use it when in doubt, and it will still work. Now, again, you're doing this only in the interim period until first responders arrive. So it's always really important to remember that too. But when in doubt, if you have Narcan, use it. So in addition to, the training that we just did, on this PowerPoint presentation, there is also a link to a video that we will have on our website readily available for you. It's a very quick info video from the Narcan providers, and so it also has some references in this presentation to the Centers for Disease and Control on how to prevent opioid overdoses. There's also information about the Good Samaritan Act and really what that immunity from civil liability looks like. There's also instructions for use for Narcan in every single box of Narcan and on the back of the box. So I'm hopeful that this video helps you, but also I'm hopeful that you will utilize these resources and always have your Narcan available to help save the life of someone else. Thank you.